Taking a dip in your hip, a glide in your stride. Welcome to the mothership, the home of the travelers of the universe, with shows throughout the week. Everything you want, everything you could need. From the paranormal to the supernatural, from the spiritual to the unknown, from emotions to comedy. You can find us at Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and so much more. This is R.I.F.T Nation Network, the RNN. And now, your featured show. Shall we begin?
Show sensation streaming throughout the multiverse. Your hang place in cyberspace for paranormal news and views. Taboo Topics with Gene, Broida, and Stan Murray.
Welcome to Taboo Topics, everybody. Before we get going, let's get the paperwork out of the way here. This is your sensitive, offensive content disclaimer from R.I.F.T Nation Network, going out to the multiverse. Please note that this podcast may contain material that some listeners may find sensitive, offensive, or disturbing. We strive to create respectful and informative content, but topics discussed may include mature themes such as violence, explicit language, or controversial subjects, triggering content, including discussions related to mental health, trauma, or other sensitive issues, explicit language. Occasionally, our guests or hosts may use strong language. While we aim to handle these topics with care and empathy, we encourage listeners to exercise discretion. If you find any content distressing, consider skipping or seeking support. Remember that this podcast is not a substitute for professional advice. If you need assistance, please consult a qualified expert. Well, Stan, here we are again. It's a Monday night.
Yeah, beautiful Monday night here. We don't have a hair a little today. So I've had a productive week. See what the kind of week comes up.
It's Monday. I have to look. April 29th, 2024. Welcome to Taboo Topics with Gene and Stan. And let's get our chat room open here. Welcome, welcome. Up. We've got our producer Ed in the house, our main man. Hi, Ed. Great to have you here. And I know some other people are going to be coming in. So we like to start with a little bit of howdy do and chit chat so we can shout people out. It has been a week. It has been a week of weather, I will tell you that. Can't go wrong talking about the weather, right? But unfortunately, Mother Nature has been the bitch that she can be. And there have been tornadoes in the Midwest where you would expect tornadoes, honestly. But even so, it's heartbreaking to see the devastation. And certainly, Stan, I'm sure I speak for you when our hearts, our prayers, and our best intentions for best possible outcomes to to the devastation that's going on there. It's very sobering to think that it could happen to any of us. So be kind to your neighbors, treat people with the respect they deserve until they are so outrageous they just piss you off and you can't help yourself. You know what I'm saying? That's kind of my philosophy. I
Yeah.
want to be as tolerant as possible, but I don't want to be a pushover. What about you, Stan?
Way. Like
Ooh, ooh.
Illinois, I think I find it killed. And
Okay, you need to get a little closer to your mic there. I think you're breaking up really badly. Oh, there he goes. So Stan lives out in the country, and oh, he's back. Here we go. Yeah, so you need to get a little closer to the mic, and it looks like you might be having some connection problems.
I reconnected.
Yep, you have reconnected. Can you hear me? Check, check, check. Okay, cool. Well, do your best there. We all have our struggles, don't we? And if it isn't technology, it's something else. I'll tell you what, I went traveling over the past few days and got locked out of my email accounts. That's very sobering. And I decided, well, since I use them mostly for work, I guess I won't work.
No,
Problem
that's
solved, right? Problem
one
solved.
way. One way to keep the work going. Just can't answer
Yeah.
it.
So we've got a really hot taboo topic tonight, really, really hot, and I'm eager to get into it. How about you?
Yes, I want to hear about this.
Okay,
That's,
well, let's launch this thing here. And I'm going to rely on you to do the chat, okay?
yes, I'll try to keep up with it.
All righty, I'm trying to find the way to make this thing large screen here. Thought there was a way. There we go. Found it. There we go. All right, the whole enchilada with sauce. So, new format to start the show. We got our awesome banner by the awesome Daryl by Daryl.com if you need graphics work. And we're going to be talking about a very interesting person as far as I'm concerned, David Icke, and what what is often called his alien lizard elite globalist theory. It doesn't, depending on what tabloid or newspaper you might or magazine you might chance upon, there are various ways to summarize his very complex and detailed theory, which happens to intertwine with my own personal and many other people's complex intertwined theory of human origin and where that human origin has led us to the present day, where we are today. How is it where we are today? I've been seeing compilations of TikTok videos because I don't use TikTok, but I do use YouTube. And there are YouTubers who are compiling TikTok videos. Thank you very much, because otherwise I wouldn't know what's going on. And TikTokers are singing, and other people are singing the blues about how difficult life in the United States has become economically, mostly economically. And also there were a couple of comments on how we exist in the United States, but we don't really live. And that was more of a cultural commentary. Well, older people in the United States remember when the culture of the United States was very different. Not to say it was better or worse, it was just very different. And of course, cultures change over time. That's one of the reasons some people are very interested in history, is because history is our record of culture and the evolution of culture. All right. So when I was in high school, I had a very excellent history teacher, Colonel Coleman, who had served in the Vietnam skirmish. And he said, very matter of factly, that history is the study of wars, which shocked me. I was a pacifist at the time, of course. being the hippy dippy that I was. And he said, yes, history is the study of wars and how one war will ultimately lead to a next war. And then the peacetime in between the wars is that redefinition of culture. So, what David Icke has done, by the way, what David Icke has done is carry forward ancient history from Sumeria, which I talk about a lot, the Anunnaki and the so called creation myth. But it's not a myth, it's a record of history as they understood it, as they were told, basically, by beings who came from another planet. This is their story. I'm not making this up, it's well documented. The Sumerians wrote down the first text in history, the thing that was important to them. Amongst the two things that were important to them were accounting for taxation. That was very important to them. And the other thing was their creation history. That was very important to them. And that is the story of Enki and Enlil, the two gods from wow, I've spaced out the name of their home planet, but it'll come to me. And how they came to Earth to mine gold, and in fact, and ultimately bioengineered humans to mine that gold, making long story short. And that is exactly what we do today. In met, not even metaphorically, we slave, we work, for human beings work in exchange for currency of some kind. It used to be gold. It used to actually, before gold, it was salt. The Romans paid salaries in salt because salt was so rare and hard to come by. It was pricey, and spices were pricey. So salt is actually the Latin root for the word salary, same word, sal. So yeah, so a little bit of history factoid. I love history. So basically, Romans paid salt. People have been paid wages in gold, in silver, in eggs. I mean, whatever it is you need, people will find a currency for it. So David Icke has made a career of connecting the dots. And as a consequence of that, he's been labeled a conspiracy theorist. And so have I. And so have a lot of people. But what is a conspiracy theorist? If you look in the dictionary, one of the main definitions for the word conspiracy is two or more people plotting together to do evil to other people. Well, this happens all the time from your HOA, your homeowners association, where you have little clutches of people controlling everybody else, the old sheriffs of the HOA. You get that. You get county corruption, politicians and corruption there. You get lots of plotting and scheming. You get it in school. You get it as children. Children are very conspiratorial and they can gang up on each other. There's the in click and the out click, and this is really that one phenomenon could lead to another show, another taboo topic on school shootings, because that's a very taboo topic to talk about what really might be going on in other words, the discussion I like to have about school shooting, which is a tragic event, don't get me wrong, is not about gun control, but about what is driving young people to shoot up their schools, which is an entirely different conversation. Not how did they get their hands on the guns? That's easy to establish, but what was it that made them want to pull the trigger in the first place? That is what interests me as a psychologist. So when we talk about conspiracy theories, the conspiracy part is two or more people plotting to do evil against others. It's an easy requirement to satisfy historically. Okay. A theory is a set of ideas that are hypothetical, meaning that we're launching, we are testing something. We want to test out some idea. Ideally, we're testing. We don't have facts. Once we have facts, we go from the realm of theory. So when you build a theory or construct a theory, then you go forth ideally and find facts to support your theory. And if you don't find facts to support your theory, a good scientist will chuck that theory and revise it and build a new theory. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's in fact the normal way that science is done. No single person is the science, despite what a certain person said during the recent health crisis. No one person defines science, and science itself is not static. It's fluid. It's constantly in flux. We're learning things every day. So, Stan, have you ever been called a conspiracy theorist in your life?
Yeah. Some of us accuse me of wearing a tinfoil hat.
Well,
Um, but I just when you have the freedom of exchange of ideas, you're going to say something that, like I said, that's going to offend somebody or somebody's going to disagree with. So they got to find some way to invalidate your argument. And that could be conspiracy theorists. They could call you a racist. All sorts of titles are going to say that to make your argument invalid. So, yep, I've been called many things. Some of them not too nice.
so it turns out that this pejorative use, condemning use of conspiracy theorists, and a lot of it has to do with tone of voice. Oh, you're not one, and phraseology. You're not one of those conspiracy theorists, are you? I've gotten that a lot in my lifetime. You're not one of those like nut job, as you said, tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorists. And that whole tone is it's a far different communication from, oh, hey, are you a conspiracy theorist?
Yeah,
Why, yes, I am. Oh, me too.
mm-hmm.
Let's get into
Presentation.
it, right? That's a whole
Yeah,
different conversation.
yeah.
But it turns out that, guess what? That pejorative use of conspiracy theory and conspiracy theorist comes from our pals at the CIA, our good friends at the CIA, who decided that there was too much public inquiry, too much skepticism going on after the beloved President John F. Kennedy Jr. was shot dead in Dealey Plaza by unknown assassins, plural, and the Warren Commission, the official investigation, came up with the lone gunman theory. Now, students of history have gone over this so many times, I won't bore you. And young people don't typically have much interest in this story because it's so old. But we'll do a show on it, not from the perspective of how awesome JFK was or wasn't, but on the aspect of how this single story, this event of American history, launched the CIA secret ops programs that used this labeling of you're a conspiracy theorist to shut down conversation, to avoid connecting the dots that the likes of David Icke wants to do and does. So they decided to weaponize language. This is an interesting concept. We're going to weaponize language and take a very innocent phrase and turn it into a weapon to discredit and ridicule people that don't agree with the official narrative about the JFK assassination. And it works so well that, in fact, it works so well, there are a lot of people, probably the majority of people, who, if they know anything about JFK's assassination, I suspect the majority of people alive today would say, yes, it was a lone gunman, and they could name that person. Well, a lot of people don't buy it, and we didn't buy it. We didn't buy it from the beginning, and we don't buy it now. And if you really question authority, you really question mainstream narrative, you're going to quickly run into this issue of conspiracies and find out there aren't, some of them, yes, are theories, but many of them are conspiracy facts. And so this is where we circle back to David Icke, because David Icke does construct theories, but he also relies very heavily on fact, which a good narrative does, as far as I'm concerned. So David Icke, it's not Icke, his name is Icke. I like Icke. Was born in 1952. He's contemporary. He's still alive. He's still lecturing. God bless him. In the background of his very nice picture here, which is free use, by the way, we have a blow up of an American dollar. And on every American dollar is the eye in the pyramid Illuminati symbol, and it's luminous. It's illuminating light, representing enlightenment. So we have the all seeing eye on United States currency. There's a whole story there. We could talk about currency and again, going back to salaries and salt. But David Icke connects dots. And for that, he has made the cover of Time magazine at least twice. And in this case, now I'm not for sure this is Time magazine, but it sure looks like it with the red striping.
Mhm.
This is the image that I got to show you that here's how he promotes himself. This is his first UK tour. He is British. His first UK tour in over 20 years. This is from April 2019. Now, before I go further to fast forward to the next year, basically, let me talk a little bit about, give a very brief biography of David Icke, and this is basically in his own words. David Icke was born in England, and as he grew up, as he said, watching trains and watching football, which Americans call soccer. He loved both, and he resolved as a teenager that he would become a football player. That would be his career, and he did. He joined the Coventry League or team, not sure what. He joined Coventry, and in 6 months, after 6 months only of playing football, pursuing his career of choice, he had an inexplicable injury where one of his knees swelled up. His knee
Yeah.
swelled up, and the doctors weren't sure what caused it, but it benched him from his football career, and ultimately the diagnosis was thought to be arthritis, but in a young man, it would be very unusual. In any event, he's not even sure why it came on, but it did. And at that point in his life, very early in his life, he had a decision to make. Was he going to sit and cry about this, that his career dreams were dashed? He was on his way, after all. Was he going to boo hoo about it and feel sorry for himself in a massive pity party? Or was he going to accept reality and soldier on? And that's what he did. He accepted reality and soldiered on, and he got a job sportscasting, right? He's in sports, so he gets a job sportscasting, which introduces him to the media, to broadcasting. And everything's going along. He's he's got a new track. He's back in the saddle again, career wise. And he's hanging out at a certain beach hang spot in uh, in his environs, wherever that was, and he ran into a woman just happenstance. Although, if you don't believe in coincidences, this wasn't happenstance. It was by design, by cosmic design. He's pretty sure it was ordained in a certain way, if you will, that it was meant to be that he would meet a woman who was a psychic, and she put him on to uh, basically, she said to him, you are going to you're going to stand on stages and inform and educate very large groups of people about what's really going on earth, in the world, with humans and in society. And he was like, really? And he said, okay. He resonated with it, one would say. He resonated with it. And so he began to undertake connecting dots that way. And he began to lecture. I've watched recordings of an 8-hour lecture that he gave. This was not a typical 8 hours, 10 hours with an intermission or two tossed in there. But the man can speak for hours succinctly and eloquently, and he connects all the dots. So for this, like Everything You Need to Know tour, he's not kidding. This is everything you need to know about human origin and how human origin has led us to basically the plight. He would call it the plight of humanity today. The plight because we, the people, we, the humans, have the power to take back our humanity and to reclaim our birthright of free will and love, to live in love and not hate, or at least mutual respect. So for all of this, he ended up here, banned from YouTube. Now, how on earth did this happen? Well, it was a studied and rather calculated series of events. And I realize that I'm kind of putting the cart before the horse here, Because if you don't know what this theory is that David Icke professes, then you might not understand the backlash and the severity of it. But I will get to his actual theory in a moment or two. I just want you to understand, you are a valued and esteemed listening audience and viewership, that this man has has attracted the wrong kind of attention, the globalist attention, by talking about the globalist conspiracy to keep us all under their thumbs. He's become an enemy of the globalists, and as such, the first the first main episode, the first main event was that David Icke was banned from entering Australia before his speaking tour began. And this was February of 2019. So in February of 2019, one woman in the Australian government took it upon herself to hate on David Icke, and she arranged to have him banned through the Australian Home Affairs Department, which canceled his visa. He had sold out speaking engagements, and it was very shocking for people who support David Icke and his message. It was very shocking. So that was 2019. The next year, 2020, YouTube banned David Icke's channel because David Icke was was casting aspersions and raising doubts about the complete truth behind the coronavirus story, C-19. And I covered that 6 months when I covered it from January 2020 when the story first broke, and David Icke was right there with a lot of us, looking at this critically and seeing that the dots weren't connecting very well at every level. Not to say, and I'm sure the man never said, as he's accused, he never said it wasn't a disease. Of course, it's a disease. What it wasn't was the lethal disease that constituted the need to shut down our society in the United States, to deem workers non-essential and prevent them from going to work the next day. So 6 months later, I, a conspiracy theorist writer for the dailyconspiracy.com, a now defunct website, 6 months later, I'm out of a job because all those non essential workers were helping to sustain the online magazines with their subscriptions. So you see how it trickles down into society, how these dots actually do connect. So when David Icke started casting doubt about the severity of the illness, not that it existed, but its severity. In other words, was it severe enough? Were the mortality rates high enough? This is what we were all talking about. Were the mortality rates high enough to justify shuttering society, disrupting society, keeping kids at home to stop their socialization process and their normal education? Was it worth imposing social distancing, which was made up, we now know, in other words, not based on science? There was some reasoning behind it that germs could spread by airborne germs could spread, but we knew in the first 3 months that coronavirus was not particularly airborne. It was spread by contact. So why did we continue social distancing? Why? We weren't following the science, as a certain person was famous for saying over and over again until he finally said, I am the science. Well, you're not. So, because David Icke tried to bring truth to that story, he was banned from YouTube. And then after that, yes, but wait, there's more. As of April of 2022, the Netherlands banned David Icke from entering. And by then, a total of 26 European countries banned David Icke from entering to speak. So when that happens, a lot of people would go, well, I guess he's a horrible man. His message must be really horrible. And if he's giving a horrible message, he's got to be horrible. But people like me are intrigued. It's like, what'd you do to get banned from YouTube? What'd you have to do? All you had to do was open your mouth to counteract the official narrative about any of a number of things. And in this case, it happened to be C-19. So he's been banned, and that raises my interest. Why is this man so reviled by the mainstream? And I will tell you why. It is, in my opinion, this is my opinion about why he is reviled. He has his own opinions, which are very similar to mine, but not identical. And I invite you to go find out about this should you care to. But if you don't want to, I will tell you. David Icke is an explainer, and I am an explainer. And look at his hands. He explains. He's an explainer. This is what he does. And what he's explaining is an ancient truth that is so fundamental to human existence that, and it's been so effectively suppressed by the mainstream for so long that it sounds ludicrous. And this is the underpinning, the backbone, if you will, of successful propaganda. Successful propaganda takes a lie with a fraction of truth in it and repeats it so much that everybody starts to repeat it and believe it. And David Icke doesn't. He's a person who questions authority, questions the narrative, and for this I love him. God bless you, David Icke. Here he is explaining something again with the hand motions, and I'm trying very hard here to keep my hands down while I present because I want you to focus on David Icke and not me. But when I get going, I am very much a presenter in the spirit of David Icke. I follow in his footsteps, if you will, although I had been looking into conspiracies of all kinds, mostly UFO related, before I ever even heard of David Icke. And when I did, we're in lockstep together, basically. Had you heard of David Icke before, Stan?
No, this is all new to me, so I'm excited.
Hmm.
I remember you mentioned something, and I'll just kind of chime in. I remember a psych uh, logic test, and it basically comes down to your rest of your logic. If the one statement you believe it, everything else will fall into place. And that statement could be a lie or it could be the truth, but the rest of the logic will follow on that one statement. And so propaganda, if there's a little bit of truth in there, then you make your rest of your statements or rest your argument on that. And to a certain degree, it's distorted.
I agree. Hey, I see that Keith has some comments too. Keith, good to see you, and thanks for sharing us out. And Renee has shared us out. Thank you so much. You're a darling. And welcome everybody to Taboo Topics with Gene and Stan. We're talking about David Icke, whose picture is right here. He is labeled as a conspiracy theorist. It is a label that some of us wear with pride. He would say, "Yeah, I am, but so what? You know, what of it?" Basically. So, what is this big conspiracy that has gotten David Icke banned from YouTube, banned from 26 European countries, banned from Australia? What is he saying that is so controversial, you might ask? Well, this is what it is. In a nutshell, this is where it starts. We have to start with the Anunnaki tale out of Sumeria. Now, I said this in a previous show. I love this is a thread I follow a lot. So if you tune into us, welcome, welcome. You're going to hear a lot about Sumerian texts and records, history, and you're going to hear a lot about the Anunnaki. So here is Sumerian artwork. Let me go back. Sumeria is the civilization on Earth which has the oldest artifacts, although I guess that may not be right with Göbekli Tepe and Göbekli Tepe and some of these other sites, but it certainly is the oldest writing on Earth. We know the Sumerians have the oldest writing that we have found and have deciphered. Okay, so we know what they were saying, and they left a lot of art. And this art, you can see that it's a precursor to after Sumer was Babylon, so the Babylonian Empire, and then ancient Egypt with the tomb art. Okay, so very few people have seen much of this Sumerian art because it's quite challenging, for one thing. It's quite challenging. Let's take a closer look at this. Okay, so on the left is a clay tablet. These could be quite big, as in 3 feet tall, 2 feet wide. I'm not sure how big this particular one is, but they weren't shy about using space, these Sumerians. So here's a being. Clearly, it's a being, has human feet and hands, but the head of what probably is a hawk. And this figure has wings as well. So, one question in my mind as a student of ancient origin is, are the wings literal? In other words, was this a being that had wings actually sprouting out of its back? Or was this a metaphor, a symbol for a being that had the capability of flight? These are different things. The capability of flight, having wings on a person might actually be code for they showed up in a spacecraft. This is one of my working theories. So we have pictures of beings with wings. We have pictures of beings that don't have wings. But in a lot of these portraits, if you will, of these ancients, they are holding a pine cone shaped object in one hand. And I could do a show on all of this. I love this stuff. What people think this stuff is. Like something like a wristwatch. And invariably, quite often, I should not invariably, quite often holding this object. It looks like a bag, a purse. By the way, there's another wristband here with a dial or something round on it. They have these. Now, that could be ornamentation, but these beings are purportedly sciency. They came in a spacecraft, so it's my hunch that no object they carry is accidental, that every object they carry, that they hold, was put to use and maybe frightened the bejeebers out of some of these Sumerians to the point where they're like, I don't ever want to forget this. Our ancestors never forget this. We're gonna write it down and show it the way it was. And in their day, everybody would have known what these things were. I can guarantee it. Everybody who knew about these beings would have known about this, okay? So we can see here a little bit about clothing, a little bit about their sense of art. Okay, this is considered primitive art in that the portrait is profile. Okay, there's no attempt here at 3 dimensions. This is just straight on profile. Now, here's another image from this epoch of a winged being that doesn't have an animal head, has a human head. Check out the elaborate beard, and I'm wondering if these aren't beads, that it's braided hair or the kind of hair that lends itself, thicker hair that lends itself to beading, and that this is ornamentation, or if it's more abstract. It's just hard to say. I don't know enough about the ins and outs of their culture. But when I look at art, I look at this is very intricate and detailed, and I look at all this detail. This entity is holding. By the way, here's that wristwatch thingy down here, fingers and a thumb holding a little goat, or I mean, it might be a full size goat, and this is a giant. Again, this is out of context, don't know for sure, but I'm looking at what I can determine. I can determine here's another one of these wristwatch items here. They're on both wrists, whatever they are, and holding it might be a feather, it might be grain, or like a papyrus leaf. Not sure exactly what that is, but it's bound to be symbolic. Okay, bound to be symbolic. Here's another variation on that theme of a winged being with that hairstyle. All of these ancient Sumerians. Now I'm thinking this, if this isn't a god, this might be a king, but the wings suggest that this is a god rather than a human. And there, note the head, there's headgear, and this person is holding a plant of some kind, a vegetable, it looks like. And again, probably symbolic of something. The hand gesture may well have symbolism and meaning, hard to say. So, who were these Anunnaki? What were they about? What's the big deal? Why would someone be banned from countries talking about this story? Well, let's just tell the story and take it from there. In a nutshell, the story is that these Anunnaki arrived from the home planet Nibiru, and Nibiru was dying atmospherically. And so the Anunnaki were scouting for, because the Anunnaki had the capability of space flight, the Anunnaki were scouting for planets rich with minerals and materials to help them repair their home planet. And one of those important reparative minerals was gold, and a certain type of gold, monatomic. And they found rich stockpiles of gold on Earth. And so they came to Earth and they set up shop in the Sinai with spaceports, and they could shuttle down to South Africa where they established gold mines. We could have an episode on the gold mines of South Africa and Michael Tellinger's work on that. Hats off to Michael Tellinger. Another day, another story. All of this stuff connects. These dots connecting, okay? So there's actual archaeological evidence that giants lived in South Africa. It's a real mind blower, and we'll do a show soon on that, Michael Tellinger. So these Anunnaki were, uh, it's not, apparently the Anunnaki themselves were giants compared to humans. They arrived on Earth with their own slave race. This was before we had Homo sapiens sapiens, modern human beings. We had proto humans, Neanderthals, and certain other types of primitive humans. Excuse me. But the Anunnaki had come prepared with their own labor force, but that labor force went on strike. And so the Anunnaki killed them all and then appealed to the home planet to King Anu, for permission to bioengineer humans, which happened. So, and again, a whole show on this whole turgid tale, which is well documented in Sumerian texts, source documents. So human beings were created literally, not figuratively, created to slave in the hot African sun. And they were also created elsewhere on the planet, apparently. In other words, human beings were proving to be a success for the Anunnaki. They were working out, literally working. So, and we were mining gold aplenty. We mined a lot of gold, but it wasn't enough to save their planet. So some of the Anunnaki stayed back on Earth, but most of them left. And they said they would return, which is a common theme amongst human origin stories. The progenitors are from off world somewhere. They muck about here and bioengineer, and then they go, well, we're going to go now, but we'll be back. We'll be back. So wait, be good and wait for us. So a lot of people have a hard time wrapping their heads around the fact that human beings were bioengineered by a race that, by the way, recognizes the existence of God. In my researches into UFOs and extraterrestrials, I haven't encountered any beings anywhere in any of the universes that doesn't attribute all life to God. Everybody believes in God. So we're not saying there's no God. What we're saying is that human beings weren't directly created by that God force that is love and light. What we're saying is that an alien species came to Earth and made human beings on purpose to slave for gold in the hot African sun. And if you fast forward to the present day, that is basically what human beings do to this day. In Western nations, or at least the United States, we have a 40-hour work week. And a lot of people are starting to question this. Buckminster Fuller questioned this back in the 1960s. The inventor famous for the geodesic dome design, a brilliant, brilliant mind. We could do a show on him because why aren't we talking about Buckminster Fuller? He's not entirely taboo, but very interesting story that's seldom reported. Okay, so Buckminster Fuller was challenging authority right and left, challenging mainstream thought. And he said, why do we have to work 40 hours a week? Why don't artists and creators get a free ride? They're busy creating, but they can't make a living off of. You can't make a living off of art. Not everybody's a Picasso or a Van Gogh. In fact, Van Gogh died broke. Van Gogh wasn't even celebrated in his own lifetime. So Buckminster Fuller said, "Let's let's have societies support the artists and creators, because not everybody is an artist or a creator. And the people who want to dig ditches and work in dirt, well, they'll do that. And people who want to build buildings, they'll do that. And people who want to farm, they'll do that, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera." And this is a theme that's repeated by other speakers as well. I'm thinking Earl Nightingale, who taught, a motivational speaker from the 1950s, talked very eloquently about how society sorts itself out. People sort themselves out. We don't need a bunch of government direction telling us who needs to do this job and that job and the other. We figure it out. We are human beings. We are creative. We figure it out. And we go with, society has oppressed us in the sense that we have these false constructs of the 40-hour work week, that you start school at a certain age. In other words, you have to wait to start learning. No, kids start learning immediately. Babies start learning immediately. We have this artificial construct called school that was invented to churn out factory workers and military personnel. This is fact, not fiction. The nature of education changed in the United States in the mid-century last century, with the eye toward squelching creative thought. Let's get rid of the Aristotelian thinking. Thank you very much. No more reasoning. Let's get obeyance. We want people to obey. And so in the 1960s, part of that cultural revolt against the mainstream had to do with this conditioning that we must obey, conditioning in school that hadn't been there before, that all of a sudden we have to obey. Do you remember that shift in the culture, Stan,
Yes.
in education? And did
Uh,
that impact you?
I want to say, like, hopefully, I think my education was through that point where it wasn't quite impacted. But you look at, again, the Christian Judeo model of education, a lot more of the classics were taught. Uh, does that make it a better education? Yeah, I think it did. Latin was taught as as the root of our English language. Uh, yes, it was a change, a shift in our education system that occurred. I want to say really, I maybe started in the 20s, but it really took root in the 60s.
We could do a show on the evolution of the United States education system to where it is today. That's a
Yeah,
taboo topic, talking
yeah,
about the demise of education as we know it, and the age of propaganda in the schools. Don't get me started, because we need to finish this one up.
yeah.
The topics just present themselves, though. Okay, so back to Sumeria, and I agree with everything you just said. That shift was palpable. By the way, Latin, you make a great point. Latin was taught as the root of English, the English language, and Greek was taught as the foundation of philosophy and ethics and morals. And so we've done
And,
away with both
yeah,
in the school system, and we
can't
also got
talk
away.
about.
Go ahead.
As I say, like those topics are just are forgone. Like I said, they're struck out.
So
That's it.
yeah, so in other words, we're not supposed to think, and now we're not supposed to speak or share what we think. And that's what David Icke talks about, and that's gotten him into very deep hot water. But he loves it. You know what I'm saying? He embraces it. He said, I could have quit. I could have walked away. He started publishing 30 years ago or more. And when he first promoted these ideas, he was one of the first to do so in a very codified way. He had it down. He could give an 8-hour presentation on this and never stray. Never stray. He had it all outlined and it made perfect sense. So one thing the Sumerians talked about was that, so on the left is a Sumerian snake goddess. She's a creator. She's a mother. So mother goddesses create life. They have help from the male progenitors. It's not in witchcraft. It's not Dianic. meaning it's not all women and men are bad. No, we need men. But the focus here is on birthing. And here's a little lizard in mama lizard's arms, suckling. Okay. On the right is how that art evolved, how this art evolved into Egypt. And this is much so we don't see the bottom of this character here, but the bottom is this is a snake on the left. The Sumerian snake becomes the Egyptian snake. That's not a huge leap of the imagination. That's not a hard dot to connect. Okay, we see lots of influences in religions and cultures around the world. In fact, that would be a good show to talk about the the archetypal gods and goddesses and the how they are portrayed in art, the symbols that they hold, that sort of thing. There's so much synchronicity; it can't be coincidental. It can't be. So, how this snake goddesses were associated with a cult, if you will, a religious belief system, call it what you will. They were worshipped in ancient Sumer, and they were worshipped, it was thought, and it is told, by descendants of the Anunnaki. So here's the tie-in with the Anunnaki and fast forwarding to modern day. So the Anunnaki, when they got to Earth, began breeding with humans, and they created monsters called the Nephilim, who were giants and had to be destroyed in the flood. But I'm sure a lot of other stuff was going on, and the Anunnaki had their hands in a lot of biological creation going on, and they spawned, if you will, this cult of the snake, and it is reflected in the biblical story of Adam and Eve and the serpent or snake coming with the trying to tempt Adam, the first man, with forbidden knowledge, forbidden by Jehovah, knowledge forbidden by Jehovah. Man didn't want any part of it. He was a company man. I stand with Jehovah. But Eve, being curious, the hallmark characteristic of human women, Eve, being curious, wanted to know. She wanted to know. She wanted empowerment. And so she did the deed. She ate the apple, meaning that she partook of the knowledge. She listened to the serpent's story, if you will, the indoctrination, if you will. So she got the story. She told Adam, and then things went horribly wrong for them. Cast out of the garden by a very angry Jehovah, representative of that god, and the rest is human history. Now, humans were crafted to take after the Anunnaki. And one of the first things in the Bible is the story of Cain and Abel, two brothers, one of whom killed the other. So we have right straight out of the garden of once they're ejected from this sanctuary where you eat food off the trees, there's no violence, you run around naked. Once Eve had bitten that apple and shared her knowledge with Adam, the Bible says they were overcome with shame and they covered their genitals with fig leaves. It says that. They were overcome with shame and modesty and they wanted to cover. This is what? I mean, really, if you think about this, if you really think about this story, what is it really, 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 really saying? Can we really take it at face value? That, I mean, kind of, sort of, maybe. I'll leave the book open on that. What do you think, Stan?
Uh, really kind of lost about it. Is it a literal or a interpretation of it? The events, like I said, I'm kind of lost on it. So,
all right, well, let's carry on. Let's press on.
My answer is non-answer.
Okay, that's fair enough. Some questions can't be answered, or we don't have the knowledge to answer them. That's why I love talking about this stuff, because I learn something every time I talk about it. And okay, so here's the super, super controversial part that got David Icke in trouble. And I advanced the screen a little too soon. I had a little twitchy trigger finger there. But the importance or significance of this snake cult is that this snake cult has perpetuated forward historically from the times of the Anunnaki, from the times of ancient Sumeria, and that one of the features of the snake cult is that they they don't interbreed; they breed amongst themselves, and that their heritage is what we now call blue bloods. And so, who are the blue bloods? The blue bloods are the modern aristocracy of Europe and other nations. So, these occult, secretive organizations that have their origin in the snake cults. So now I'm talking in more modern times about the Illuminati, Rosicrucians. There are many, many, many secret societies that JFK warned about in one of his last speeches. It's a little mind boggling. So they do what we might call satanic rituals, if you believe in Satan, which I don't happen to, but they call it something else. They meet in places like the Bohemian Grove in California. Illuminati get together. In other words, these Anunnaki uh, who did interbreed with humans and oversee the breeding of humans and lineages decided to, well, they, by necessity, they probably had to enclave themselves off genetically. They drew a very hard line to where there's a lot of modern debate about whether a royal person in Britain should marry a commoner. It's come down to that. But the gene pool is so uh, what's it called? They have inbreeding. There's,
Mhm.
historically, royal families have inbreeding because they haven't diversified their gene pools because they want to keep this royal or blue blood. And the blue blood is thought to have to do with copper in the blood, which is thought to have to do with another theory we can go into on another day.
Mm.
But one of these rites that snake people presumably or allegedly carry out is the drinking of, well, that their nourishment, the idea is that their nourishment is negative human emotion. It's an elixir to them. David Icke
Mm.
talks about this. They love to feed on negative human emotion called louche, Louche, French word louche. It's like dross, in other words, leftover. It's and they will provoke people. They have telepathic abilities, and they can provoke people to become upset, become unbalanced, become unhappy, and create negative energy to feed off of. And it can lead to what we might call possession, even. And I know that there are people in our audience who have direct experience with that, so I'm not going to belabor that point. But one of the substances that they particularly love is called adrenochrome. It's a derivative of adrenaline, and adrenaline is released when we have the fight or flight reaction. And so the horrible story that circulates on Conspiracy Street and perpetuates to the present day is that these lizard people, who are elites, globalist elites, the blue bloods of history, monarchy, the world people who sit on the World Economic Forum, people who founded the International Monetary Fund, and basically all of these organizations trace back to the Rothschild family as the primary movers and shakers of modern times. And we could do a whole show on the Rothschilds as being the social engineers of modern times. So the idea is that to get the juiciest, choicest adrenochrome, the the lizard cultists will traffic children. This is where it gets awful and terrible. They traffic children, they enslave children, and they terrorize children. They go on a campaign of terrorizing children and then ritually kill them at the height of their distress to release as much adrenochrome as possible. And then they drink these kids' blood. That's the story. It's gruesome. It's gross. Does it really happen? Hard to say. But the likes of Prince Andrew of Britain is implicated in this. The likes of people who visited Jeffrey Epstein's island are implicated in this particular conspiracy theory. Is it actually a fact? Will it become known as a fact? Who knows? But I found this graphic and it really sums up both the insider and outsider view of this thread of the story. And I'll read it. The satanic elite in reptilian form extracting adrenochrome from children. Okay, so what's this reptilian form? Another part of the story is that the Anunnaki have the ability to shapeshift, and there are YouTube channels dedicated to showing shapeshifting in media, for example. Now, I'm not totally on board with all of that because videos can be faked. However, have you met creepy people who you thought might be something other than human, Stan?
Oh yeah, yeah. Uh, Something like maybe a newscast about a serial killer, and you look at them and you say, "Well, that person doesn't look right." So yeah, I've seen pictures, and there's a few people I've met that I just want to keep my distance from them.
So here's a quote from David Icke. We laugh at sheep because sheep just follow the one in front. We humans have out-sheeped the sheep because at least the sheep need a sheepdog to keep them in line. Humans keep each other in line, and they do it by ridiculing or condemning anyone who commits the crime. And that's what it's become of being different. And the crime is contradicting the mainstream narrative. So, David Icke's wake up call, it's time to wake up to the truth of our reality, the truth that there are globalist elites with roots back to human creation who've taken it upon themselves to direct human history and human culture and keep us enslaved when we could be free. And the idea that we could be free if we banded together and organized and threw off the shackles of that tyranny, that is what gets us banned. That is what the Illuminati hate, because the only way to dispel darkness is cast light upon it, and they know it. They know it. So thumbs up and cheers to David Icke. He's one of my culture heroes. If you'd like to know more about me, have ideas for the show, want to contact Stan, please email me at Yahoo. And I always like to talk about my book. David Icke isn't in this book, but he might be in a future book. It's on Amazon. Appreciate your support with that. How do we get out of here? Here we go. Here we go. So, what do you think of all that, Mr. Stan?
I'm going to be reading more about him. Like I said, he presents some very interesting theories. I think, like I said, it's up to us as individually go and read more about them, hear more about them, and make our opinion. But I guess I think, why would you ban something? To me, you'd be much better off to let them speak. So banning, in a sense, validates what he is trying to say.
Well, I
Could he
agree.
really
I
be that
agree 100%.
Could he really be that dangerous to let him speak?
So the Dutch, by the way, here's a news article. The Dutch banned Ike, and he's banned from Netherlands and dozens of European countries for 2 years from 2022. So this year, maybe he's unbanned. But the reason they gave was, quote, he poses a threat to public order of all things. There'll be insurrection if people know that the Illuminati are lizard people who drink adrenochrome and are behind human trafficking. I mean, this is serious, serious stuff. These are allegations not to be bandied about lightly, but we're not bandying these about we're not bandying lightly. We have Epstein diaries now. We have names. We got lists. We've got, not that being an associate of Epstein means that you drink adrenochrome. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that once you do start connecting dots, you see that censorship is afoot. Clearly, because governments are responsible for this recession, this repression. This is actual censorship. When YouTube suppresses, that's not censorship because YouTube is not actually a government. Governments censor, okay? But a corporation can suppress. It's slightly different. Means about the same thing, but David Icke put off YouTube. YouTube was just waiting for an excuse to ban him. They got their excuse. Who will be next? Who will be next? We got to keep that torch of truth going. We got to keep it lighted. We got to pass it like a baton at the Olympics. What do you say?
Let's keep it lit.
Yeah. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. It's been real and it's been fun. And I don't know about you, but it's been really fun.
I've enjoyed this one.
Thanks everybody for tuning in to Taboo Topics with Gene Broida and Stan Murray. We're proud to be a part of the R.I.F.T Nation Network. We're good people. We mean the best. We do understand if you have comments, concerns, or criticisms, please reach out to any R.I.F.T Nation Network admin or to me, Gene Broida, at genebroida@yahoo.com. And until then, peace out and stay calm. Don't forget your towel. Any last words, Stan?
Good night.
All righty. On that, let's find our exit. Here we go. Say goodnight, Stan.
Good night, Stan.
Good night, everybody. Peace out.